My name is Dylan Goldsmith, and I am co-owner of Captured by Porches Brewing Company. We started as a homebrew club that just kind of grew and grew, and to the point where we finally decided that we better get a license to continue doing what we're doing. Fortunately, we found a space out in St. Helens, an old warehouse, used to be a Greyhound bus barn. We started out just selling kegs. We didn't own very many kegs. We did not bottle yet. We started bottling about 3.5, 4 years ago. And I had always been resistant to bottling because of just how wasteful the single-use containers are and how expensive it is. We just decided that we would just go ahead and go for it and try it out. And we got a few small accounts at first, and then it just started building. More and more people were interested in it and supportive of it. New Seasons stepped in rather early and agreed to start letting us sell at one market, and then 2 more markets, and then eventually almost all of their markets that they have. The first one that we had went in at Kruger's Farm on Sylvie Island. Memorial Day weekend we showed up and people just kind of stared at us because it was 10 o'clock in the morning, we were trying to sell pints of beer. By the 4th weekend we had done really well over beer sales that weekend, and so we stuck to it. Overhead compared to a brick and mortar place is much less. The city ordinances regarding food carts in Portland do not require for you to drive the vehicle off the property, as some municipalities in Oregon do. And then the temporary sales license regulations that the OLCC allows for use of your annual license in a second location for special events are actually quite generous in the number of days that you can be open. And so it just kind of, it worked out to be something that we could do on a budget and still, generate revenue and provide jobs. My initial capacity when we first moved into Clinton Street Brewing, I'd say 2-barrel size batches, and I would brew 3 times a week sometimes. Currently I'm able to I'll do 4 batches every other week. So we'll do like 1 week on, one week brewing, 1 week packaging. And when I do that production, 3 or 4 different batches between 6 to 9 barrels each, 60 barrels a month at maximum. We have a brew pub license, which allows for self-distribution for up to, I believe, 5,000 barrels per year. I think it'd be a better idea to self-distribute for a few years, establish yourself, and then when you approach a distributor, you already have existing sales, for which they, by the way, ought to pay you for that distribution right. Just like if you had a distributor and they were distributing in the area and then they sold that contract to another distributor, they would owe them for generally it's a year's margins. So $30 per keg that was sold in the previous year should be the sale price of the account. And if you're self-distributing, you should demand that of the distributor, even if it takes them a year or 2 to make payments to you. Just don't give away all that hard work. The packaging philosophy, I would say, mostly driven by why do you need another brewery in Portland? Why do you need more bottles on the shelf? If you're going to do something, if you're not doing something that's different from what other people are doing, our choice of using 100% reusable packaging is more of a personal commitment to the ideas of just social responsibility and environmental sustainability. Single-use bottles are incredibly wasteful in terms of the energy that it takes to manufacture them and crush them and reuse them, and you can only use I think 50% recycled glass in the manufacture of new glass, and so there's just waste inherent in there. We were the only brewing company for 3 years that was using reusable glass deposit bottles on the West Coast, I believe. It's more sustainable in the sense that rather than buying glass from who knows where, and then you buy it and then you sell it and it gets crushed and reformed by someplace else, we have people who get paid to come in and help us wash bottles and to delabel bottles, and then to label the bottles and to fill them up and send them back out again. And one consideration that we had to do was how are we going to make sure that the accounts can successfully distinguish our bottles from theirs. And so we went with the visibly different swing top or grille style enclosure. A normal 22 is about this tall, so they're a little bit higher. If they actually get put into the wrong box, then they stand out literally, like by that much. They're visibly different from the other bottles, and we have a giant, it says dollar deposit bottle. It's about as unsubtle as we can get. And the Oregon bottle bill has provisions in it to allow for the return to reusable glass. You can have like 2 bottle sizes, one approximately a 22 or larger, and one around 16 ounce size. And if you do it, you have to use the same kind of bottle, the same design of bottle, so that I can use that brewery's and they can use ours bottles. In terms of how to convince accounts that it was a good idea to take it on, the first thing I did was I went to the websites of all the organic dairies that sell glass bottles of milk and found out all the places where they were already selling their stuff. So I knew that these accounts would be a little bit soft towards reception of sustainably packaged materials, going a little bit beyond the norm of making an extra effort on their parts to make that work. And it was just a lot of footwork and a lot of time talking to people, and then checking back in and making sure that everything flowed, because sometimes you'd come back 3 weeks later and there's no bottles being returned, and you have to find out what it is that needs to happen to make sure that the bottles are being successfully returned. So I don't want to lose the account. I don't want the store to decide that, oh, this is too much of a hassle, we're losing money. If somebody brings this in and they get $1 for it and then it gets crushed and recycled, the store only gets 5 cents, they lost 95 cents right there. They're not going to put up with that. I'd have to say that we were pretty successful with that. You have to pay attention to it, but any time you're a small business and you're getting an account, you're going to have to be doing a lot of footwork and a lot of talking to people, and there's a great benefit to that too. The bottle is brand new. We have 2 different suppliers. They cost between $1 and $1.35. Built into the sale price of it is the labor of washing them and inspecting them. If people don't bring them back, we're not necessarily losing money. I don't think that there's a limited number of uses. It's more about how it's handled. When we wash them, the very final thing to do is they go over a light table to be able to kind of inspect for any flaws or any fruit fly eggs or anything that didn't come out. If there's a cigarette butt in it, we recycle it. We don't bother trying to wash that. We haven't been doing it for long enough to encounter the wear and tear issue of being on it. Like, we don't have any of the bottles with the glass lines that German bottles frequently will have from being reused many times. If you don't have some kind of a sizable deposit to motivate people to bring the bottles back, you're going to have to assume that I think you just may as well use single-use bottles, because you're going to be paying so much more for the quality of glass that reusable bottles are made from is more expensive. They're more durable. They weigh nearly twice as much. So if you're not going to charge a decent deposit, I don't think that it would work. It would work in Quebec, where people are used to bringing their bottles back. Where people are not used to bringing their bottles back, it won't. I don't think it would be as successful. What I would like to see is an increase in the technology of our production to where it's more efficient in terms of my own labor, and in terms of being able to fill more product at the same time. And then I'd like to try and, at least, if not lower our prices, keep them stable to where inflation will make our prices be relatively lower, and then expand into an outer market through distribution into Washington State, possibly Northern California. But the returnable glass thing is kind of going to, by its nature, keep it more of a regional type distribution, I believe. Kind of the reason that bigger companies didn't want to do it anymore, because it didn't match. If you have one production plant for like the entire West Coast of beer, you don't want to be having to deal with trying to keep track of all that stuff and getting it back.